So I'm recording Animate, but I am going to be going back to the browser occasionally to just go over, just look at what we're working on. That won't be part of the video, but of course you can go to the site and see what's on there when you're watching it. Anyway, this is what Animate is going to... Okay, that's fine for now. We can work on that later. Yeah, you don't have to follow along right now. If you want to use your iPad, you're welcome to. But for now, I'm just going to demo, and then we can help log in a little bit later. Okay, so when you open Animate, you are going to see some like basic options. Actually, if you open it for the first time, you're probably going to see like a window that says like, do you want to do this tutorial? And the tutorials are useful. You're welcome to do them. They have like interactive tutorials that kind of walk you through all the steps. So if you want to do that, you can, obviously. But if you're not opening it for the first time or you get rid of that window, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see some different options to create a new file. There's a bunch of presets in here. If you click on more presets, I'm actually going to go with a slightly smaller file size. Instead of full HD, I'm just going to do regular HD. That's partially because the projector has a kind of a low resolution, so I don't have as much space on there. You're welcome to use full HD. That's what it says in the class notes, but obviously if you do regular HD, that's fine. This looks kind of weird because I think the projector is making this look weird. So actually what I'll do is I'll just click on full HD. This is going to make a new project for me. If I want to change the window size, I got to move this capture thing over here. I'll put it down here. If I want to change the window size, I can go to this properties window, and I'm going to do 1280 by 720, which is like the old standard for HD. So a couple things with the interface. If you've used Adobe before, you already know this, but there's like different layouts, and you can customize the layout. So under Window, okay, mouse is doing something weird. What? Okay, for some reason my mouse is not mapped correctly. Anyway, here we go. So if we go to Window Workspaces, you'll see we're in the basic workspace, which is good. The classic workspace is also useful. You're welcome to use whatever you think looks good, but just to show, so for example, the real difference between those workspaces is essentially where the tools are and where the timeline is. If you want to move stuff around and play with different workspaces, you can move the timeline down here. And when you see a little blue bar pop up in all these different areas, you can move that window. And so you can completely customize the interface. You can also like make stuff smaller or larger. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do. I'll let you guys play around with that. If you get a workspace that you really like and you want to use later, you can save them. So if I want to save this workspace, I can go to, where is it? That's where I was looking for it, but I don't see it. Also, if you move stuff around and you want to go back to the way it was before, you can click on that Reset Classic. I don't know where this is. I might be missing. There's something weird happening with the main menu. I don't really know what, but I'm gonna have to worry about that later. Usually there's like a thing to save the workspaces right there. Let's see. Let's try help. Oh, this isn't a Mac, so I won't be able to search for stuff. Okay. Let's not worry about that for now, but you can save workspaces if you have a workspace that you like. I don't see where it is right now, but that's okay. Okay. So so that's the interface. You can move stuff around. There's a few basic windows that are part of this default interface. The main one is your canvas where you can draw and do your animation. There's a couple useful shortcuts for this. There's like a zoom window thing here, so you can fit the whole animation to the window. You can also show a certain percent, like 100% if you want to zoom in. And there's a couple shortcuts to help you do that. I think it's Control 1 is 100%. Control 2 is like fit into the window. Control 4 is 400. 8 is 800. So I'm holding the Control key on the keyboard, and then I'm going to 1. Usually I'll be going between 1 and 2. 1 is so I can draw at the actual resolution, and 2 is so I can see the whole scene that I've created. So those are the shortcuts I'll use most of the time. If you want to change the shortcuts, it's easy to do this. You go to Edit and go to Keyboard Shortcuts. And then you can look up keyboard shortcuts either by name or by the shortcut itself. So for example, if I put a 1 in here and then click Match here, I can see all the shortcuts that use the 1 key. So magnification 100% is Control 1. So if I want to change that, I can click on this and change it to something else. And then if I have a shortcut that I really like, or a key map that I really like, I can also save my own shortcuts. I don't think I'm going to change anything, so I'm going to leave it at the default. But when I'm on a Mac, since most Mac keyboards don't have the function row keys by default, I usually change those to my regular number keys. So we might look at the keyboard shortcuts later. I'll talk about keyboard shortcuts that I use. But for now, we can continue. So that's the canvas. There's a bunch of other stuff that we'll do there in a minute. The timeline is where we do all our animation. So this is where we can like scrub through stuff. We can play back stuff. We can turn things on. I'll be using this obviously in the demo, so we'll go over this more. The toolbar on the left is where we can see what tools are selected, and we can choose different tools that do different things. If you stretch this out, you'll see all the tools like that. Sometimes I do that. But if you click on this 3 dots, you'll see the tools that aren't defaults. So some that I like to use, they have the classic paintbrush and the classic pencil in here. I use those. I usually don't move them to the toolbar because I know the keyboard shortcuts for those, so I don't really need to. But if you wanted to be able to see those, you could move them over here. That's just because I've been using Flash for a long time, Animate. But the fluid brush and the classic brush are also good. There's the eraser, there's shapes here. You can choose different shapes. There's a line. There's the pen tool, which is like Illustrator if you use that, text, paint bucket. So all the regular tools that you would expect to have are in here. And then the properties panel changes depending on what you click on. So you'll notice if I click on my brush tool, I get properties for my brush. If I click on my selection tool, I get properties for my selection. So depending on what tool you're using or what window you're working in, you'll see different properties. There's also like your color palette if you want to choose colors. So you have swatches over here. This stuff we're going to ignore. The library is something we'll look at a little bit later. You have your motion presets here. We might look at that. That's pretty much everything that we're going to use in terms of the interface. And so the main thing that we're going to go over today is this idea of frame-by-frame animation versus tweening. Frame-by-frame animation is the classic style of animation where you draw each drawing in the animation. Morning. That's what Disney uses. That's what like anything that looks hand-drawn, mostly older styles of animation use. Tweening is digital animation. It's when we use the computer to fill in the frames in between 2 different states or drawings for us. Morning. We'll go over that in the second half of class, but most modern animation uses some combination of the two, but they use a lot of tweening. So if you look at animations like Rick and Morty or like a lot of Fox animations, those sort of like higher production, but like regularly occurring animations, they use a lot of tweening. They also use other techniques that we'll cover later in the semester. But that's the main sort of like basic difference that we're going to talk about today. For this part of the demo, I'm going to go over a frame by frame animation, and then later I'll go over a tweening animation. This part, let's talk about for a second, and then we'll do this later. Actually, I'll do this right now, and then we'll pause. We'll do a second video for the frame by frame. So for the frame by frame, we're going to use paint, which means I'm going to draw new images on each frame. And I can do that as much as I want. I can make tons and tons of drawings and make a whole animation out of drawings. I can't tween drawings. I can only tween shapes or symbols. So what we're going to do later is we're going to turn one of my ball drawings into a symbol, which we can then tween. We can do motion tween. So we'll talk about that later. But for now, we're doing paint. I'm going to be painting with a paintbrush or the pencil. And so I'm going to use the paintbrush. Again, I use the old paintbrush, so I'm going to use the Y keyboard shortcut. But if you want to use the new paintbrush, you can use the B keyboard shortcut. Depending on which paintbrush you use, you're going to be drawing vectors, so you're going to be drawing points, and then Animate is going to fill in the color between those points. Depending on which one you use, it's either going to be a stroke, meaning it just outlines the vector, or it's going to be a fill, meaning it creates like an outline of your stroke and then it fills it in. We're not going to worry too much about that right now, but just so you know that. And then file format. So this is the last thing I'm going to go over real quick before we get into the frame by frame animation. I talked about the width and height of the canvas. Full HD is going to be 1920 by 1080. That's what like basically most TV and YouTube videos, Netflix videos are that size, or at least they have been for like the last, I don't know, 10 years. We are sort of slowly moving into 4K. So a lot of YouTube videos will now be shot in 4K. A lot of films are obviously released in higher resolutions. As I mentioned earlier, I'm actually using a smaller resolution. I'm using the old HD standard from like the 2000s, which is 1280 by 720. I'm using that because I'm on a projector with lower resolution. I don't need as much space. For this assignment, you could probably get away with 1280 by 720. You probably won't lose a lot of detail there. But most videos that you're going to see on the internet are going to be 1920 by 1080. We're using pixels. We're making digital animation, so we don't really have to go into all that other stuff. And we want to do 24 frames per second. Actually, I think I forgot to change this, so I'll take a look at that in a second. But that's the kind of standard that we're going to be using for everything this semester. And so then we want to make sure to save our files. So this is the last thing I'm going to go over for this bit. So yeah, I didn't change the FPS. So if I have my properties window open, you can see the document settings. I have 1280 by 720. I'm going to change the FPS to 24. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw my first, well, actually, I'm going to just draw my first frame. Well, actually, I'm going to save this even though there's nothing in it so we can get started in another section. So I'm going to go ahead and save this even though I haven't done anything yet because I want to go over saving the file and just remind you guys of how there's different file formats. The Flash, the FLA file format is like our edit file. And later we're going to export the video file, which is what we can post on YouTube or Vimeo. So I'm going to go to File and Save As. And I haven't created like any folders or anything yet for this class. I like to keep things very organized. So I'm going to go to my desktop and I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call this ANI 260. So I'm going to put all of my projects in here. And so I'm going to go into ANI 260. And what we're working on today is called the ball study number 1. We're going to do 2 ball studies this week and next week. So I'm going to make another new folder. So I'm still in my desktop in ANI 260. I'm going to right click again and make a new folder. And I'm going to call this ball study number 1. Okay, we'll have to work on that in a little bit. Yeah. Okay, so we have ball study number 1. I'm going to change the file name down here. I'm going to call this ball study 1.fla. And so that the file extension for the Animate document is .fla. I'm going to click Save here. And if I click on my little File Explorer icon down here, I can make sure that worked. I can go to the desktop, go to ANI 260, ball study number 1, and you can see the file there and a recovery version of the file. And I went over this last week, but just as a reminder, if you don't see the file extensions at the end of these files, the way that you can see that is you can go to View in the File Explorer and turn on File Name Extensions. So you can see the icon that kind of tells you what type of file it is, but we want to make sure we know what files we're looking at. So having the file name extensions on is going to be a useful thing for us. Okay. I'm going to pause this